Okay, today I have the opportunity to get a chance to talk to somebody. His name is Devin Fleenor. I got a reach out from somebody that's on a team that he's working with on a project, and the whole thing caught my attention. So I jumped on the horn, and luckily Devin was able to spend a little time talking to me before he heads off to the Mutech Festival. So, with that, let's say hello to Devin. Hey, Devin, how are you?
I am well, and thank you for having me, man.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're just getting ready to hit the road, so I appreciate you kind of squeezing me in at the last minute.
Yeah, of course.
So to begin with, why don't you fill us in a little bit on your work, both the bigger picture work, but specifically this project you're working on right now?
Okay. Well, I am a media artist of sorts. I work a lot with spaces, and creating immersive experiences. The path that I've taken kind of started with music. When I was young, that was my outlet, and I tried to create music however I could with rudimentary devices at first. But so I was creating a type of electronic music of sorts as I got into my old 20s and that kind of thing. And started getting much more interested and passionate about the visual as I kind of jumped into a project in my late 20s, early 30s. That opened up the doorway. We went on tour, and I bought my first lasers, and we had a whole bunch of every part of the show had video projections and custom visuals that we had made. Fortunately for us, like myself and Blaine, who was one of my collaborators, are both visual artists. We got into a heavy visual experience, and that was kind of a big shift for me. And from that point on, when I got back from that tour, I've kind of transitioned more and more into creating spaces and taking light and sound and kind of trying to work with people's imaginations and really create something that's hopefully unusual for them. And that has kind of fed right into SEED, which is the project that I've been working on for the last 2.5 years. SEED stands for Stellar Emissions Encapsulation Device. And the idea there is there's multiple levels of star reference, because my original concept was for this to be a solar-powered installation, and it will be. Currently, we haven't implemented that full solar plan, but it's on the way. But the idea there also is just that this device isn't so much an artwork that tells a narrative from an artist. From the very beginning, I imagined this entity, a sort of autonomous, mysterious entity that was somewhat connected to distant places, distant but also yet very close, and part of a very intimate feeling kind of in that piece. And so SEED for me was I didn't want it to ever feel like I was telling a story or issuing a dogma or creating some sort of direct messaging, and more so that it was an exploratory platform, and that the people who partook and the people that observed and the people that interacted with it were just as much as the artist and the storyteller and the navigator of this exploration portal. And so that's kind of the vision for SEED in a nutshell.
That's very interesting, and it's especially interesting because so often artists are really nervous about giving up control of the storytelling, right? Giving up control of the narrative. That seems to be, for a lot of people, that seems to be the artwork, right? So it seems almost strange to say that you're willing to let it go.
Well, I think so. I think you're right. There are a lot of different people doing art for a lot of different reasons, and I think that it's great when an artist has something important to say and wants to use their art form as a conduit for communicating and relating with people. It's part of the whole reason why people do art, I think, to be able to tell their story or to tell a story or to communicate. And I feel like I definitely identify with that. And in the bigger picture, this piece coming into fruition and existing even is kind of my way of communicating, right? That's my narrative.
Right, right.
But in the experience itself, I didn't want it to feel. I wanted to be able to just. So it's like it's a layer of abstraction, I guess.
Right, right. It's almost the making of the piece was your narrative, not what the resultant piece is. Sure.
Yeah, and I also wanted to make this be a much bigger thing, like I didn't want it to be about, oh, this is a piece by Devin Fleenor, but more so a platform where we could collaborate with lots of different people, and that's what it's kind of become. I mean, the team of SEED is quite an amazing collection of brilliant people, from whether they be more on the academic side or just a purely interactive artists. We have a bunch of amazing coders and different types of designers. We have an amazing industrial designer that's handling all the fabrication and just all the little details that make a museum caliber piece. So all these people are taking their little role. We're all excited about how far this thing might go, because of what we're aiming for. It's really kind of incredible, like how the organic progression of resonant people has kind of gathered us, just this little crew of magicians, and things are. It's been amazing.
Well, it's interesting too. You just kind of mentioned a couple of things I want to dive into more. First of all, you mentioned fabrication, and unlike a lot of space-oriented things, normally when you see people talking about space in relation to artwork, normally it's like site-specific installations and stuff like that, right? Where
Sure.
they come into space and they utilize that space. Well, you're actually making something that is a standalone piece that you take the space with you, right?
Right. I mean, this SEED is basically a 8-foot cube, some glass, some acrylic, some aluminum and magnesium. But yeah, it looks like a giant aquarium of some sort, seamless. It's not 360, but it definitely is a self-contained kind of device, but with surround sound, having a quadraphonic sound system, and then just the fact that this thing is capable of emitting such incredible amounts of intensity as far as light, that the whole room, 40-foot long, chamber in the museum, lights, when it's at full blast, the whole room is incredibly lit up, because of the LED wall is incredibly bright. All of the RGB lasers, when they all fire out in pure white, everything becomes almost so bright that it's not comfortable to look at.
Wow. So now for people, in the show notes, we'll definitely put in a link where they can kind of get a visual. But why don't you explain what the experience is for someone that enters this art piece?
Well, you walk into a dark space, fairly dark. I mean, not pitch black, but a nondescript darkness as you enter in. If there's no one in this space, you'll find that the SEED device is kind of in a hypnotic state, a dreamlike state with very mild and minor activity of kind of hypnagogic imagery of sorts, if you can imagine this device entity having these little dreamlets. But we have motion captured in the room, and so we know when people enter in, and we know how close they are to the device in content of the entire room. When you enter in and the device and then the motion sensors have tracked that you're there, it scans you in some kind of way. It's like little sound effect, and it's like you immediately kind of tell that, hey, the device is aware and just sense something, and kind of gives you this little like first initial feedback of, hey, I see you. And that kind of begins the transition of this thing to waking up. And that's when, you start to see different types of feedback and different types of things happening. We have multiple cameras in the space. So like you might notice that as you move a little bit in front of the device that you see like the old school psychedelic analog feedback where it starts to trail off into infinity. Now, we're able to modulate all that dynamically and do some really cool stuff with software, obviously. So we have a lot of interesting processing, a lot of things going on. We're also doing a lot with time glitching. So you might see yourself and think, hey, that's me doing this. And then all of a sudden you realize, no, that's what I was doing a minute ago, which is really fun because we also can do that with the audio in the room. So if somebody's laughing or somebody says something to someone in a quiet, close way, they might hear that whispered back in a glitched up, chopped up fashion, 5 minutes later, which is a little bit of just for fun, basically having a fun time with it. And it's so easy to do with the technology. Those kind of little tricks are just little bits of audio entertainment, And so as you're coming closer to the device, you might have a group of people with you, and it's going to kind of sense the movement energy and the proximity. And there's a lot of things that will go on, and as the music will start to become more aroused. There's the lasers in some way will start creating geometric patterns as people get in the more closer ranges of this thing, and it starts to become kind of a storyteller of its sorts. It's kind of the music that we're doing for this piece is all generative and all algorithmic, so it can be controlled by the brain of the piece and with direct inputs of obviously everything that people are doing. But that being said, it was really important for me, and I think that's just my background in being a musician and wanting to understand, really just having a strong love of music, that I didn't want this piece to sound. It just couldn't ever sound like a experimental interactive art piece where it just kind of has this kind of robotic bleepity bloop, analog modular synthesizer kind of just doing sound effects. And you hear that a lot in these types of installations. And in this piece, it could not be that. It had to this piece has to sound like an entity with a personality and with a voice and with emotion. It needed to be really emotive and very, very connecting on that emotional level. So that when you leave the place, you kind of walk away almost like you had seen a concert and you'd seen a band or something where you're like, I remember the way that sounds. It has a very unique voice. And so that's kind of, a very critical part of this piece and the design. Stuff we're working on right now, actually.
You talk about it in very personality terms, right? You talk about it, kind of hibernating and having this state that it comes awake, but also about how you want it to. I mean, again, so often with this kind of art, a pointed part of it is to say, look, this is machinery doing it. It seems like you're literally going the opposite way. You want to say, no, this is an entity, and it doesn't matter what it's made of. It's a being, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, clearly it's a challenge to try to pull off and we're only going to be able to do it so well at a certain level, and then we're going to reevaluate and analyze how that all went down. We'll keep developing, and that's the cool part about artificial intelligence. Is you can get going with artificial intelligence. And I know I jumped into it. That kind of felt like maybe a quick, weird segue. But with artificial intelligence, you can get into that world with simple machine learning, but then you can get super, super, super deep and complex in deep nets with very, very elaborate neural networks. And you could have machines all over the world processing your data in real time. And it could get really, really next level very quickly. But related to the experience, just to finish off, there's this next level that we get to with the piece, and it's a touch. There's 6 pressure-sensitive touch sensors on the glass on the front of the device, shaped in a hexagon. And there's a lot of hexagonal, triangular geometry throughout the entire piece, in the design, in the position of the lasers and the mirrors, and everything that's happening kind of is really based on the math, the geometry of Metatron's cube. I started looking at Metatron's cube as a 3-dimensional object, which is really a cube inside of a cube, and all the points and it's with a certain rotation. But anyway, the point is as soon as you start touching these hexagon pressure-sensitive pads, you enter a whole nother level of things just get much more interesting. The lasers, it's like you start to you have all these different modes of operation where sometimes it feels like a call and response where you're playing an instrument, not one that you can really grasp all the way, but you can tell that you're definitely playing something. And then the machine comes back and responds and, and has like a compatible response to what you've just played. And then there's this idea that you're just unlocking different types of visual modes, different types of symbolism, different types of sound. And it's very tactile, and it's just a really incredibly interesting kind of communication device / discovery instrument of sort. Obviously, there's always this kind of sense of unpredictability, and the fact that the entity is still there, even though it's never quite like you have full control of like a piano where it's like I hit the key and the thing makes the note. So it's not ever that direct. There's a little bit of resistance, a little bit of ambiguity. And those things add to this kind of sense of, a wonder and awe, like what's next? What could happen? Why did the lasers just all shut off?
Right.
So we want to keep the people who are playing with it feeling very connected, and definitely knowing that what they do is therefore recognized, and it's never a puppeting kind of dynamic.
The Metatron's cube thing kind of implies this thing where it's almost multi-dimensional in that you can find patterns and small or greater areas. It's almost like a different form of fractal behaviors. Absolutely. Or whatever, right?
Yep, very similar. In fact, a lot of the fractals are based on the golden ratio. Mm-hmm. That's all in Metatron's cube. And in S.E.E.D, we within that Metatron's cube, we do a lot with golden rectangles. And the thing is when you start playing with the golden ratio and feedback, now you've got fractals.
I see.
And so we're like right in there in that niche, that nook.
So I am curious about something. One of the things I like to explore in my podcast is how people get into the things that they're into. The person who reached out to me about you sort of like kind of identified you as a DIY developer, thinker, marketer, artist. They basically said, you're sort of like do everything, and that's how you define yourself. As you talk about the development of this, I can see where that's coming from. You seem to really have excitement and kind of ownership of a lot of different areas in this thing, whether it's the sound of it or the nature of it or the graphic representations, all this stuff. It's really important to you. I'm curious about what in your background put you in a position to sort of be able to juggle all of these kinds of things in a way that makes for the interesting artist that you are.
I think really a lot of it ties into my computer experiences. And when I think I was like 7, when I first really understood what a computer was, and then I started to learn about it. And I think by the time I was 8, my grandparents bought me my first home computer, and I started. I think they also got me a couple books and maybe a class for like the weekend. It was like kind of like I think they taught us BASIC. It was like one of the very first kind of home computers, common languages. I just dove in, and I spent a lot of time, I just had a natural affinity to that. It really did kind of change I just kept going and going with that, not properly, obviously. And, back then in grade school and high school, whoever, knowing how to use a computer or program a computer people thought it was cool, but there weren't computer programming classes. And, it was early enough that just wasn't really much a thing. I mean, in high school, they had a computer class, but it was just so that people could know what they were and, like how to type a document and, just like the basic stuff. Yeah, that really shaped everything. So when I first got exposed to the internet in 1996, I made someone taught me HTML, and I just started, and the internet totally has been a medium of just incredible connectivity, and it's just been an invaluable resource for me. I've been one of those kind of people that's learned how to script things, how to automate things, how to communicate through all these channels, and figuring out ways to syndicate bits of information properly. And so I think I'm in some ways I'm a strategist. I really love puzzles, and I love, to me, the internet and how you could, with virtually no resources or no proper training kind of take over the world, you know? It's really incredible. And I've just been, the band that we booked that tour, we booked a 9-week tour across 17 countries in Europe. That was all DIY. That was literally, we created music videos, and this was back in the, like 2007 to 2008, we started making music videos for this project. And there weren't a lot of people making cool music videos for like indie projects. And so we were kind of doing stuff that we could really milk, and people resonated. And so we got to quite a following on YouTube for an independent band that didn't have any, we didn't have a label. So I think at one point we had like 12,000, YouTube subscribers. And so I wrote a little script that messaged all of them. I basically messaged every one of our followers on YouTube, and I was like, hey, we're considering doing a European tour. If you happen to know anyone that might be able to be helpful, it could be a venue or a radio person or somebody at book shows, or if you know someone, just let us know. Write us back. And I misspoke. We didn't send it to every one of our subscribers. We sent it to every one of our subscribers that lived in Europe.
Oh, right. Okay.
We had like 1,200 positive responses. And we booked all those countries, and we booked all those shows, and we did it all like just through the goodwill of like a network, through people that happen to want to help. And so that's kind of a sample of the kind of way that I've approached things. It's just like, let's just try it, and let's just like use the tools that we have available to us and see what happens.
Right. Well, you come across as kind of fearless, quite frankly. And, it's fearless to just say, we want to go on a European tour, and I'm going to message a whole bunch of people. And the fact that it worked out is great, right? And it seems like you're kind of, I think for a lot of people, some of the ideas you have behind the SEED project would seem to be too big, right? But it seems like you're a little bit fearless, and you're like, I got to do it. I have to give it a try.
I don't know if it's fearless, but I'm definitely a fan of confronting your fears. Uh-huh. And I think you can be afraid, but if you're willing to admit it and you're willing to at least face it, you can continue to move. You can continue, you're not paralyzed by it.
Oh, right, sure.
I think I'm afraid all the time. I'm confused all the time. I'm very much oftentimes feel like I'm wandering in the dark, moving forward and just with just the instinct of maybe which way I should be heading. But yeah, in a lot of ways, I do think I understand and I agree. And I do not allow the general perception of difficulty to be much of a factor. I end up having to scale back my designs. I was so dismissive of the difficulty that at some point that difficulty is a law of physics or some sort of hard, resource limitation, and it smacks you in the face, and, your optimistic, dismissal of it, has to be addressed. So I definitely have to deal with that side of it, right. There's the reality of these things. And that's a good thing to start. It's a good way to start your vision. Why would you want to plan for an artistic project or a venture or a business or anything where you're just aiming for like the real reasonable, practical, middle-of-the-road goal?
Yeah, it sounds hilarious when you say it that way, but I swear, I think a lot of people, that's one of their first and most primary decision-making tools is, what can I imagine myself being able to do fairly easily, right? And that's the starting point for what they do, and that's such a set of handcuffs. It's not funny.
I think you're right. I think a lot of it has to do with how you were raised. What your parents tell you about what's possible that's going to affect what you believe is possible in a lot of ways. And I was extremely fortunate to be raised by, loving parents, but my grandparents in particular were like so supportive. And I think, they recognized they're like, Devin's really smart. So we should just really we're going to give him every possible opportunity that we can, as far as and most of that was in the form of just learning and encouraging me to be like, you can do whatever the fuck you dream up. It's possible. You could pull it off. And if you hear that all the time growing up as a kid, you're going to believe it. Right. And I think it's so important. That's why education is so important. And so it's unfortunate, but many people are not given that message. So we have some neural regeneration that we need to work on our way.
So now, one of the things I noticed in the information I got is that in addition to being an art piece that is going to be shown and stuff, you're also interacting with folks at Ryerson
Hmm.
to do some academic research on sort of like a therapeutic methodology or a therapeutic angle to working with this kind of device. Can you fill me in a little bit about what that means?
It's extremely important to me, and I dropped out of grad school to go on tour. Actually, my goal, I mean, my interest was neuroscience, and I mean neuropsychology to be specific.
Okay.
And I just didn't do very well with grad school. There was a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of arbitrary tasks and things of that nature, and I just don't do well with those. And so I got real impatient with that. So I don't think proper academia is really my path. So but I've always wanted to be in that realm. You know, to me, it was like that. To me, scientists were like, those are the people that I most respected. Artists, obviously, I do respect. I have great respect for many artists, but like to me, also scientists were like that guy's awesome, you know. And so my idea to be able to link art and science is not new. It's probably been in the back of my head since I was younger, because I really have always enjoyed that. And I think that I've also had this kind of idea that they're similar, you know, like science is an art, and there's science in art and art of doing science, and they're really not all that divergent. And so with this idea of therapy, I was just, you know, being a fan of these kinds of things, I've always been up on the research, and there's just a lot of research coming on, you know, last decade, really getting going, that shows brain tissue growth differences in people who are experiencing these different kinds of therapies, both with just music and consuming art, being creative, using your body, movement. And so, meaning what they're doing is they're able to track, using MRIs, brain tissue changes. It's night and day, and it's the same kind of thing they're doing now with psychedelic research. People are doing a lot of this with taking psilocybin or LSD while doing brain scans and seeing what types of different neural pathways are being developed, and do they last? And that's when we definitely do find that these new pathways are persistent. So the research that, you know, if you can give somebody the ability to create some sort with their hand gesture or whatever, and then you find out that that's not only just giving them general improvement of wellness and mood and happiness, but when you're able to show brain tissue changes like that, it's pretty a miraculous kind of thing in my mind.
Right.
We're just at the beginning of this process. We're just literally linked up with Ryerson in the last month.
Okay.
And so all this stuff is kind of just happening, and we're developing our abstracts to get ethics approval, which is they're going to be submitted actually this week or probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Once we get ethic approval, then we're going to do some preliminary data collection and analysis. So it's like, here's one big part of this. We use a camera inside the device that is able to, when someone's in that touch range, when they're actually touching the sensors, that's when we're able to lock in and grab their facial features and their facial expressions. So we're analyzing and recording their facial motions and movements, which in a way allows us to track positive emotion. Right. So if they're smiling or if they have a sense of awe or like excitement, we know that, and we can track that in real time. So that is a really great tool for indication of what's going on in someone's mind. But not only are we using it as a data factor for our research, along with heart rate variability and some other things, some qualitative surveys and different things. But that positive emotion is also the main data source for our artificial intelligence algorithms. So what we're doing is we are able to judge and determine what types of factors, colors, certain hues, certain tempos, certain types of chord progressions, and we can have these key factors, and we can go back and forth and try to figure out what types of things are triggering this enhanced positive emotion response in this individual. And then we can make note of that. Everything's being recorded, but we can also dial it in real time to give them more of whatever it is we think they like.
Do you worry at all that it could be too much? Well, first of all, was this thing not debuted at Currents at one point?
Yeah, yeah,
That's where it first was shown, right?
yeah. Yeah, that was a very beta type version in my
Mm-hmm.
mind. We kind of think in art, and we always kind of refer to it as a beta. But yeah, it was like for us, we had to do that. So
Uh-huh.
in June of last year, 2016, we set it up and built it and took it to Current's New Media Festival, which was a great experience, and we learned a ton. It was like boot camp for everyone.
Yeah, I love that. I love that festival so much. I love the people that run that. But that means that you have put people through this thing, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
and so what I meant by that is you put a fair number of people through this thing.
Right.
How much did you have to sort of like dial it in or dial it back or push? I mean, did you find you have to initially make some sort of assumptions
Hmm.
on what people like? Did you ever find that it was like if things were too enjoyable and you kept on pushing that button that it would take it like over a bad edge? Or, I mean, I'm just kind of curious, like, what the reaction of people were, especially in the early parts, because I have never done an art piece that was, at least I imagine it to be kind of like having the potential of being overwhelming and kind of invasive, right? I've never really done anything that like that. And so I'm curious about the process you went through to like trial it and then with early users tweak it and what did that look like and what were some of the things that you found maybe surprised you or maybe disappointed you.
Well, first of all, we didn't have the machine learning component going on in at Currents.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So what we did have are, certain kind of thresholds where, based on how close they were, the proximity effect was our main indicator. So we were tracking people with multiple cameras in the space, and we would navigate different moods or different types of operative states
I see.
based on their proximity. There wasn't the facial recognition camera, there wasn't any artificial intelligence yet. So right now, I'll give you a quick summation of where we're at. The idea is it's a very subtle thing that we're doing, and I'm more concerned about just making sure that we're able to track and identify things that we're recording all this data, because I see this as all very much like an initial kind of creating a framework, a foundation. So
Right.
I'm not looking to really like crank up the feedback loop as per se to get the amp squealing. We're not going for that. This is going to be a very subtle thing, and the reality is when we go back after the fact and analyze this data, we're going to be like, okay, we can map out all this data and we can really learn like what's going on better over a few months probably of analyzing all this than what we're going to be able to pull off real time. So what might happen is if somebody seems to really, really enjoy certain types of chord progressions, these diminished minor chords or whatever they resonate with,
Uh-huh.
we can take note of that, and we can weight those types of chord progressions higher. And I don't think that would ever be overwhelming for someone. Same thing with colors and hues. If people are really, really into red, or people are really, really into yellow, I think that there's definitely there's moments of intensity, but I think there's also going to be moments of minimal, lots of moments of very spacious. And
Okay.
I'm always pursuing minimalism in everything that I'm doing. So even as complicated as all this is, I'm always like, let's get rid of more of this stuff. Let's dial it back and darken it. Let's black it
Sure.
out for a minute.
It's interesting you say that because, quite frankly, one of the things I was wondering is how much this ends up being like a William S. Burroughs style pleasure machine or something, right?
I mean, it'd be kind of cool.
I guess it would be. It would definitely make a splash, that's for sure.
Yeah, like I mean, that's not the worst case the scenario.
Yeah, right. Good point. So anyway, it's yeah, you're right. That's not the worst case scenario, but it does kind of point to a lot of potential futures and it actually seems like you're already starting to explore some and talking about some. You're talking about, over time being able to ramp up the machine learning aspects of this and over time being able to get more data from the users and stuff like this.
Mhm.
What are like the mid to long term futures for a technology or a framework like this? What do you imagine this becoming?
Well, um, I think that the approach and the escalation of artificial intelligence is definitely, it's something that is unexposed to the masses, and most of us don't think a lot about it, and yet it's coming rather quickly. And I think that there's going to be a real escalation over the next 20 years in artificial intelligence. So that's going to kind of probably overshadow the artificial intelligence shifts that will occur are going to overshadow anything that I'm probably doing with the technology. But that being said, I think that that's really where my mindset is at. Like, how can we use a device, both in an artistic sense and in a therapeutic, medical, scientific sense, to really give someone an incredibly dialed in custom treatment and or experience and or whatever that we're giving them, connection, love. Maybe we can simulate maybe we can simulate love. Yeah, I don't know how or what that looks like, but the point is we can do some really incredible things with artificial intelligence technology and the way things are going. And I think that's been a big problem in the medical profession in psychology, that we tend to try to put people in boxes. We try to say, you have this disorder, this is the kind of things that you're suffering with, so we're going to give you medication A or B or C. These kind of one-size-fits-all kinds of diagnoses and treatments. And so I think that that's going to shift the incoming progress that's made with artificial intelligence. I think our research will just grow much more elaborate, and I think we'll be working with EEGs. I think we'll be working with fMRIs. I think we'll be working with different types of amazing open CV technologies. There's this computer vision, which we'll be able to do more and more and more with understanding someone. And I feel like we might be treading on some kind of controversial and maybe even threatening activities. Because think about, an art piece like S.E.E.D 2 generations from now or 1 generation from now, where it's in multiple cities and they're all interconnected via the cloud. All the data is stored online. So, and then we can imagine we're keeping track of everyone so that when you come up and you touch it, we are able to gather a lot more of your bio data. We recognize who you are by face. We put an identification on you. And now anytime you were to show up in any of our systems, we would know. We'd be like, hey, that's Darwin. And here's this entire bank of information of where he's been physiologically. And I think that's scary for certain people to hear about and think about, the idea that, an art piece might do those kind of things. Right. So it's pretty incredible. I imagine these things aren't that far down the road.
Yeah, boy, it's interesting you say that, because I've been in a number of conversations lately about how machine learning is becoming almost creepily powerful right now. And so, yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it actually infecting my art viewership, but maybe I need to start.
Well, let's keep an eye on it and see. Let's just see how this plays out. And over the next year, we're going to keep developing this, and so I'll keep you in the loop with progress and things.
That sounds great.
We're always looking for people who resonate with what we're doing to reach out to us via the website and contact us. This is a huge, big project with a ton of working parts, and we always are looking for new people. So if you have any interest, by all means, contact us at devinfleenor.com. We also do a ton of, most of our social media is through Instagram. My username is epicdevin, or you can search for me for Devin Fleenor on there. I think it come up.
Okay, and I got a chance to see a video that sort of showed some information. Where's the best place to check that out?
If you go to devinfleenor.com, right away, you're going to see there's going to be a couple different videos, and it's definitely there.
All right, awesome. Well, fantastic. So with that, then I'll let you go on with the rest of your day. Thanks again for your time.
It was an honor. Thank you.
Bye. Many thanks to Devin for talking with us about the project. I hope that you get a chance to take a look at it. You can really hear the excitement in his voice when he talks about it. It's obviously something that he really feels strongly about. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for sharing this with your friends. I'm going to keep it tight today. We'll catch you next time around. Bye.